Hello, welcome to Outland Woodworks. My name is Shane, and today we're going to be looking at unboxing and installing the Wixey WR700 60-inch saw fence digital readout. Let's get to it. Up, see what we got. We are installing this on the Harvey HW110S52P. This gauge does have an accuracy of 0.02 for every foot, so we have 0.10 accuracy over the entire width. Here we have our gauge. And here we have, appears to be our mounting hardware that is zip tied into the box. I have a feeling we're going to have to drill some holes, but let's see. This looks to be the sensors. One of our rails, and the other rail. Some more goodies in there. Little prank box comes with it. So for our first step, they want us to join these two rails together. In a couple of our bags, we have one beveled connector, 4 M6 screws, and 4 M6 flat washers. And we're going to connect them by sliding it halfway into one, using a flat washer and one of the bolts. I'm going to start that in there. And same thing again for the second one. This is a 10mm. Just snugging them down at this point. Not very tight at all. And we're going to take the other end of our other one and slide it over that. And repeat the process. It does look like for these you can get some wiggle room on it. So I would recommend setting a straight edge along this and setting it on a flat surface. In this instance, we will use the table saw top. This is a 50-inch Tay-Tool straight edge. I'll put the link for it down below. I'm just pushing firmly down and together, making sure that we are flush against it. We'll snug this down. And giving them all the final little snug down. Not overly tight. Double checking. They're nice and square, flat. And now we have one large rail. For the next step, they want you to determine how you want to mount this. There are several ways you can mount it depending on the type of saw that you have and the rail system that you have. And here with the Harvey HW110S, we have square tubing. And there are two ways we could mount it on square tubing. There is a flush mount and a dropped mount. Now, I was inspecting this here, and a flush mount would have worked, except on the master rip fence for it. The locking mechanism for this that goes up against the rail, when it's in its unlocked position, is below. It goes below that. And I don't want to risk damaging the readout. So I am going to go for the dropped position. So we are going to look into the install procedure for that particular one. If you have a different one, it'll show you in the instructions how you should mount those. So now to determine our mounting location for this rail, a couple of things I want to do on this particular saw. And again, the kind of saw that you have and the kind of fence and rail system that you have will vary. Please refer to the directions for how to do your specific saw. I'm going to raise the blade up, and I'm going to bring my fence down just until I touch the blade. And that's going to be representative of my 0. Now from there, again, mounting it in the way that I will be mounting it, there's one of 2 ways. I can left side mount it, or I can right side mount it. I think I would like to right side mount it, but I want to make sure that if I do, my rail isn't too long. So on the right side mount, the rail is pretty much flush with our mounting bolts, a little bit towards the blade. So I'm just going to set this under here and see where that falls. And this rail together is about 63 inches. And that's going to be long, very long. To that point. So I think I may end up doing a left install. That way I do not have to cut my rail. Yep, I believe that's what we're going to do. So on the left side install, we have a bracket that we need to mount on our bolt. It's the only bracket in the peg like that. There are some bent in that same S configuration, but they are for a completely different purpose. So let me get this bracket on here, kind of set this in place, and I'm going to get out some painter's tape and just kind of mark where everything is so I can lay out the spacing on my attachments for the rail. So I just wanted to take a minute and note that after I removed the bolt from this so I can attach this bracket, this hole was just slightly too small. So I had to take a slightly larger drill bit and wobble that out just a little bit. So if Wixey, if you're watching your holes on this particular saw, this is the Harvey HW110 S52P, is just probably a 64th too small to fit the bolt into without basically threading the fitting, which would be difficult to adjust. So just wanted you to know that. Now in this next step, when you loosely assemble these, there are 2 slots in these brackets. And one end is longer than the other. One slot is longer than the other. The short slot is also wider than the other. So you want to make sure that you put your beveled bolts into the long slot to attach to your rail. Otherwise your washers will fall right through it. So I went ahead and put my 2 on the outside. I set them roughly a ½ inch in from each end. And I did that so that I could measure how much I had left from center to center bolt to determine where I should put the other 2. And I've determined at about 20 1/8 from the center of this to my next one, and from that one in, and it landed on like a 32nd or something like that, and we're not going to get that particular with it. So what I'm going to do now is take a tape measure and a pencil. I'm going to go to my 20 1/8 from the center of this, and again, these are set in about a ½ inch. And this doesn't have to be precise. It's a little bit of OCD on my end. And then we're going to put a little mark. And we're going to do the same thing from the other end. Okay, with that completed, we're going to take these end ones, slide those down to my mark. Okay, now we have all of our brackets on roughly where we would like them. I'm taking a 10mm socket, and I'm going to go ahead and tighten these down. Now to determine where we want this fence to land at, which we already have an idea, but I want to be a little more precise here. We've already got our mounting bracket on. we are going to stick that to that. That does have a magnet on it. We want the rail to come about a 1/2 inch or so past where our gauge is. So, and this doesn't have to be exact, just somewhere in that vicinity. So about right there. And I'm going to put a piece of painter's tape on there for reference. Now we're going to flip our rail around and lightly clamp it so we can mark all of our drill holes. Now that we have our rail kind of mounted up where we want it, they do say that you typically want about a 1/2 inch, and again in this configuration, and maybe this applies to all configurations, between the face of your rail and the face of your fence. So I just took a combination square and set it to a 1/2 inch and went down and spaced it accordingly. Now that everything is loose, what we are going to do is we are going to take a center punch and go down each of these slots and put us a dot right in the center of each of those for drilling. So we're going to crawl under here and punch us some spots, and then we'll get to drilling. I did want to take a moment and make a special note for the 52P and the Harvey if you're following along and you have the same machine. On the very right end, the rail that holds all the tops and the rail together stops before the end of the rail. So when you install it this way, if you do initially like I did a 1/2 inch from each end, that far rail will not have double thickness of metal on the bottom because it stops short. So what I did was I just moved that rail in probably about 3 inches or so until I was comfortable with where it landed on the double thickness. So we are going to be drilling through 2 thicknesses of steel here, the original plate and into the bar. But I just want to make note of that on this specific machine. All right, now that we have all of our holes marked on the bottom, we took a center punch and punched up right through the center of each one of these. So we put a mark there. I did take a little bit of painter's tape and marked on the rail kind of where those were in case I couldn't see them when I got underneath there. We are going to take a drill, and the Wixey kit comes with 2 drill bits. This is the larger of the 2, and we've got 4 self-tapping screws that are going to go in here. So we are going to go underneath here where all of our punch marks are and drill through our 2 pieces of steel, and hopefully these bits really do the job. We'll see. Now that we've got our holes drilled, I have set out the self-tapping screws in the approximate locations of each of those holes. And we're going to pull this down, putting a drop of oil on the end of each of these before we run them in. And this is a 10 millimeter. And snug them down and go from there. It's starting to pour here, which I'm sure you can hear. I'm going to have to loosen this up as it is not exactly where I wanted it. Tighten this end back down. Just snug. I'm not final crank on it yet. We'll wait until we get the gauge and stuff on to see for sure. But I'm going to go ahead and do these. It's raining so loud right now, and you may not even be able to hear me. But let me get that and wait for this rain to chill out, and we'll be back. Now, since the rain has let up, and so I can actually hear myself think now, I went ahead and kind of loosened the nuts and adjusted it around. Basically, I've got the rail about a 1/2 inch off my fence rail, which is where they suggest. And our next step is going to be applying our sensors. Now, if you look closely on these sensors, you'll see a letter T. And you want that T to be facing upwards. And I'm just going to verify here. Make sure we only want to do this once. Yes. T goes upwards. First thing we are going to do is clean this rail with a little bit of denatured alcohol and a clean rag, because these do have adhesive backs. Just to get all of our fingerprints and everything off of them. And we want to take our first strip, and you're going to peel the paper off of the adhesive. And we are going to carefully, I want to start about where the seam is. Get it there in the middle. And gently set it in the track. And then run my finger down it. I'm going to use a clean part of this rag. Do not use the denatured alcohol. And I'm just going to rub and press that down firmly. Next, we are going to need an alignment tool. It comes in the bag. And this slips into, there's 2 little pinholes in the end of that rail. And there will be 2 pinholes in the end of this rail. So we're going to take the next strip, making sure the T is up. We're going to pull the backing off. Maybe. And this is going to be tricky. So we're going to place this in our first one. Slide this in behind. Placing that in our second one. And gently set it in the track, being careful not to push too firmly until you get it situated. And we're going to take our rag again, using a clean part of the rag. And we're going to firmly press that into place. Then we're going to remove the alignment tool. So for the next step, we're going to be installing our gauge. There are 4 screws in the back of this that, if required, you can loosen a little. If you find that it's too snug on your rail, it just slides on from the end. And I think it feels pretty good. Just checking the 0 here to make sure we're still, we're still good, still on our sensors and everything. Next, we need to install a couple A batteries and go through the setup on the gauge. We got our 2 AAA batteries installed. Push once on the on-off cowl button, and it will turn on. You can switch between millimeters and inches with the top button. Now, I have not squared this fence up yet, so it's still loose. What you want to do is slide this all the way down to your blade until you just touch it. Make sure that you're looking at when it locks, because sometimes they can kick one way or the other a little bit when it locks. And this one's kicking a lot because it's not tightened down. And then once you get it there, you're going to hold the on-off button for 3 seconds. The ABS is going to flash, and then it will zero itself out, and you're set to go. And this is particularly good for this saw because the arbor comes in from this side. Anytime you change a blade kerf, it's going to change your ruler, which I don't even have on here yet. I may not even put it on. I don't know. We'll see. So this way, if I change kerf, I can always re-zero, and I know right where I'm at. So that was the install for the Wixey WR700. It was a lengthy one. It wasn't a super easy one. It wasn't overly difficult either. As long as you're comfortable drilling some holes in your rail, the rest of it's pretty well just taking your time and getting it done. If you found any of this useful, please consider giving me a thumbs up. If you like this kind of content, consider subscribing. If you know a friend or somebody that might be interested in seeing this, please feel free to share. I really do appreciate you being here. It means a lot. But next we have to do just a few things left on our build. So if you'd like to see that, you want to see this whole build, any of that, go back to the channel. They all should be there. If not, they should be shortly. And I will also do a recap on this entire build and go over a lot of the highlights of a lot of these parts. So thanks again, guys. I really do appreciate it. Have a fantastic day.